Hello everyone. Today's biochemistry class is on early clinical exposure with respect to case of diabetes mellitus. And here I'll start with the case study or case presentation. A 44-year-old male patient, software engineer by profession, came to the OPD with complaints of weight loss in spite of excessive eating. He also complained of leg pain, weakness and generalized malaise. Along with that, he also noticed that there is increased frequency of urination during the daytime and also at the night time. So seeing these features or complaints, the physician asked for certain investigations and it revealed that random blood sugar was 345 milligrams per deciliter, urine sugar was 4 plus and hemoglobin was 12 grams per deciliter. So what is your diagnosis with the above lab values and the clinical features which are given here? What is your diagnosis? What is the biochemical abnormality seen in this case? Third question is, what is the biochemical basis for these symptoms? What are the other investigations you would like to do in this case for the further evaluation? And the fifth question is Benedict's test, write the procedure and the interpretation. So seeing these seeing these laboratory values, the diagnosis would be there is hyperglycemia because the random blood sugar is 345 milligrams per deciliter. Normal would be less than 200 milligrams per deciliter. And there is also 4 plus urine sugar which indicates that there is glycosuria. So hyperglycemia with glycosuria, there's a disease which is diabetes mellitus. And the clinical features which are supportive of diabetes mellitus here are increased frequency of urination, that is polyuria, excessive eating, that is polyphagia, weight loss, and along with generalized malaise, weakness and pain in the legs. So the initial diagnosis here would be diabetes mellitus. The remaining question, what is the biochemical abnormality, what are the biochemical basis for these symptoms, other investigations, we will see in the subsequent slides. So to begin with, we will know what is diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is one of the leading cause for blindness, amputation, and it is also major cause for renal failure, heart attacks and also stroke. It is a metabolic disorder which is characterized by hyperglycemia, that is increase in the blood glucose levels. And this is caused by either insulin deficiency or insulin resistance. Resistance here is to the actions of insulin. So the diabetes mellitus can be caused because of insulin deficiency or insulin resistance, which in turn leads to several systematic complications if it is untreated or if it is not treated well. So because of this, it is one of the major cause for blindness, amputation and other major illnesses. So classification of diabetes mellitus, it is broadly classified as type 1 and type 2. And this classification is of importance, of significance, because the treatment differs in type 1 and type 2 and the complications are, acute complications are different in type 1 and type 2. Type 1 diabetes mellitus, which was previously known as insulin dependent type diabetes mellitus, and this is because of autoimmune beta cell destruction and there is absolute insulin deficiency. But the term insulin dependent diabetes mellitus is not used now. It is called as type 1 diabetes mellitus. The next one is type 2 diabetes, which was previously known as non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus, and this is due to insulin resistance. There is a progressive loss of beta cell function. So because of these features, because of this biochemical abnormality. In type 1, it is autoimmune beta cell destruction, which in turn causes absolute insulin deficiency. So the symptoms will be abrupt. The presentations will be very abrupt. Whereas in type 2, which is because of insulin resistance, the symptoms are very vague and it is gradual in onset. The other commonest type of diabetes mellitus is gestational diabetes mellitus, and it is usually diagnosed during second or third trimester of pregnancy, which was not clearly overt diabetes prior to gestation. That means before the pregnancy there was no presence of diabetes. It is occurring during the pregnancy and it is usually diagnosed in the second or third trimester of pregnancy. Other than this, there are other specific types of diabetes mellitus which are due to various other causes. The one of them is monogenic diabetes syndromes, and these include neonatal diabetes and maturity onset diabetes of the young, which is known as MODY, maturity onset diabetes of the young, and this is because of mutations of the glucokinase gene or mutation of the hepatocyte nuclear factor genes. The other types of diabetes, sometimes diabetes can also develop because of diseases of the pancreas, which can be pancreatitis or cystic fibrosis or pancreatectomy, which can be done because of certain other causes, or hematochromatosis. All these diseases of pancreas can lead to the development of diabetes mellitus. And the other one is the other type of diabetes which can develop because of certain medications, which is known as chemical induced diabetes mellitus. And these includes long-term use of glucocorticoids or the medications which are used in the treatment of HIV, or certain medications which are used after the organ transplantation like interferon alpha and all, and thiazide diuretics long-term use can also develop diabetes in future. Other than these, some rare forms of diabetes mellitus which can develop because of presence of anti-insulin receptor antibodies, and certain viral infections like cytomegalovirus infection, congenital rubella virus infection may also lead to the development of diabetes later in life, but these are rare forms of diabetes mellitus. The most common ones are type 1, type 2 diabetes and the gestational diabetes mellitus. So now let's see what is a little bit of type 1 diabetes mellitus. And this is characterized by loss of insulin producing beta cells, which are present in the islet cells of Langerhans in the pancreas. We know that insulin produced by the beta cells of islets of Langerhans in the pancreas, and type 1 is characterized by loss of these beta cells. So this will lead to absolute deficiency of insulin. And the mechanism for this loss of insulin producing beta cells is autoimmune mediated. So what happens? The islet cells of Langerhans will be infiltrated with activated T lymphocytes, and which in turn leads to infection, leads to a condition called as insulitis. So this progressive T cell mediated autoimmune destruction, which is T lymphocyte mediated, will progressively cause depletion of the insulin secreting beta cells. So the mechanism here is autoimmune mediated. The islet cells will be infiltrated with activated T lymphocytes, which causes insulitis, and this process, which is progressive in nature, will ultimately lead to destruction of the insulin secreting beta cells. So the symptoms here in type 1 diabetes usually appear abruptly. That is because the destruction of the insulin secreting beta cells is continuously taking place, and when about 80 to 90% of beta cells have been destroyed because of autoimmune processes, the symptoms will appear suddenly. So, in short, 5 to 10% cases of diabetes are of type 1 nature. The onset of symptoms is very rapid. They may present with ketoacidosis, and it is caused by loss of pancreatic beta cells. So the patients are dependent on insulin for the treatment. The main mode of treatment is insulin injections, and that is why this disease was previously known as insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. So what metabolic changes we can see in type 1 diabetes mellitus or in generalized diabetes mellitus? And whatever metabolic changes are mainly because of insulin deficiency or resistance to the insulin action. And mainly 3 organs are affected or involved. The main organ which is affected or involved is liver, muscle, and the adipose tissue. It is very evident that there is hyperglycemia. That is because of decreased insulin production. Whatever glucose which is taken through the diet or which is synthesized in the body, it is not utilized. So there is increased concentration of glucose in the body. That is presented as hyperglycemia. And there is also decreased peripheral utilization of glucose. And because of this, there is excessive production of ketone bodies, because there is increased mobilization of free fatty acids in the absence of glucose from the adipose tissue. And once there is increased concentration of free fatty acids, there is increased fatty acid oxidation. So the ketone bodies are produced. So there is ketosis. Along with it, the lipid metabolism is also affected. There is increased concentration of triglycerides in the body, along with increased VLDL, LDL, and decreased HDL levels. And this is again secondary to insulin deficiency. Because of insulin deficiency, there is excessive breakdown of fatty acids, which is called as lipolysis. So once there is increased lipolysis, there is more and more concentration of non-esterified fatty acids. So once there is increased rise in these non-esterified fatty acids, they will be converted either to acetyl-CoA and ketones, or they will be re-esterified to form endogenous triglycerides, which are in turn incorporated into VLDL. So all these processes will lead to increased VLDL, increased triglyceride levels in the body, and simultaneously there is decreased HDL cholesterol, which is a good cholesterol. So metabolic changes which we will be seeing in diabetes mellitus will be hyperglycemia, hypertriglyceridemia, increased VLDL with decreased HDL. So the first line of investigations when we are evaluating type 1 diabetes mellitus includes fasting blood glucose or fasting blood sugar, PPBS postprandial, that is after 2 hours of taking food, HbA1c, which is also known as glycated hemoglobin, which is very useful in the initial diagnosis and long-term control of diabetes after taking medications. We have to also look for serum insulin levels, presence of serum insulin autoantibodies, and C-peptide when we are evaluating or dealing with type 1 diabetes mellitus. The main treatment here is insulin supplementation. And complications which are commonly associated or seen in type 1 diabetes mellitus are diabetic ketoacidosis and hypoglycemia. Let's move on to type 2 diabetes mellitus. This is more common. About 90% of cases of diabetes are of type 2 in nature, and this develops gradually without much obvious symptoms, which we see in type 1 diabetes mellitus, and symptoms are generally very vague, like patient will complain of generalized malaise, that is body pain, weakness, or pain in the legs, or they may also complain of muscle cramps. There may not be exactly like polyuria, polyphasia, polydipsia, which are more common in type 1 diabetes mellitus. And the main cause or basis for development of type 2 diabetes mellitus is insulin resistance. Whereas in type 2, it is insulin deficiency, absolute or relative insulin deficiency, which is because of autoimmune destruction of beta cells of Langerhans. Whereas in type 2, it is resistance of target cells to the insulin action, so that whatever glucose is there in the body, it is not utilized. So there is hyperglycemia. So the main defect here is resistance to the insulin actions in the body. And there may be dysfunctional beta cells or pancreatic beta cell failure. Here the concentration of insulin may be normal or it can be decreased, and sometimes there is increased levels of insulin in the body, because since there is resistance to the insulin action, the pancreas or the beta cells might feel that there is the requirement of insulin. It starts producing more and more insulin. Even though there is more insulin, it is not utilized. There is resistance to its action. So the concentration may be more in some patients. So the main culprit in type 2 diabetes mellitus is insulin resistance, and this is defined as decreased biological response of target tissues to respond properly to normal circulating concentrations of insulin. This is the definition of insulin resistance, that is decreased biological response of target tissues, which mainly include liver, adipose tissue and muscle, to respond properly or adequately to the normal circulating concentrations of insulin. And the main component of insulin resistance includes metabolic syndrome. Metabolic syndrome is also known as syndrome X or Revens syndrome. And this is related directly to the insulin resistance. And the components of metabolic syndrome includes increased abdominal obesity, that is waist circumference. For males it is more than 40 inches and in females more than 35 inches. Increased fasting plasma triglycerides level more than 150. Decreased HDL levels, less than 45 in males, less than 35 in females. And blood pressure more or equal to 130 by 85 millimeters of mercury, and fasting blood glucose more than 101 up to 125. So these are the components of metabolic syndrome. Other causes of insulin resistance leading metabolic syndrome includes obesity, lack of physical activity, improper diet, and stress. The improper diet mainly includes consumption of excessive saturated food, trans fatty acids, or consumption of more and more fatty foods or fried fruit, with decreased intake of vegetables. So what is the mechanism behind insulin resistance, or why central obesity plays an important role? Because the central adipose tissue, which is metabolically very active, releases large quantities of free fatty acids. And these free fatty acids compete with glucose as a fuel supply for oxidation in the peripheral tissues, which may induce insulin resistance. So since this is active metabolically, which has more and more free fatty acids, which will, as there is competition between free fatty acids and glucose as fuel supply for oxidation in the peripheral tissues. So there is a resistance to the insulin actions. Also, this adipose tissue contains hormones like adipokines and cytokines, which act on specific receptors to influence sensitivity to insulin in other tissues. And physical inactivity, which is associated with downregulation of insulin sensitive kinases. And also there is increased accumulation of free fatty acids within the skeletal muscles. So all these physical inactivity with central obesity will in turn lead to insulin resistance. So the glucose whichever is there in the body, it is not utilized properly, so which in turn leads to hyperglycemia. The other cause for insulin resistance is dysfunctional beta cells. Other causes deposition of amyloid, which will in turn lead to destruction of beta cells. And in some individuals, there is genetic predisposition for the development of type 2 diabetes mellitus. Other environmental causes: overeating with BMI more than 30 kilograms per meter square, physical inactivity, pregnancy, because of decreased insulin sensitivity because of action of placental hormones, and increasing age itself is a risk factor for the development of type 2 diabetes mellitus. So the metabolic changes are similar as we see in type 1 diabetes mellitus. There is, because of lack of insulin or because of improper functioning of insulin, there is hyperglycemia. Once there is decreased insulin action, there is increased secretion of glucagon, cortisol and growth hormone. And these hormones, as we know, it induces gluconeogenesis. So along with decreased peripheral utilization of glucose, there is also increased production of glucose within the cells, increased gluconeogenesis. So all these things together will lead to hyperglycemia. In the lipid metabolism, there is hypertriglyceridemia, decreased HDL and increased HDL, and the mechanism is similar. And then with respect to protein metabolism, there is increased protein breakdown. So what is the basis for clinical symptoms which we see in diabetes mellitus? That is polyuria, polyphasia, polydipsia along with weight loss. Polyuria, polyphasia, polydipsia are the cardinal symptoms which are seen in diabetes mellitus. What happens? Why these symptoms appear? When there is increased concentration of glucose in the blood, which is known as hyperglycemia. Normally the glucose which within the normal amounts, once it is passing through the kidney, it is reabsorbed by the proximal tubular cells. But there is a certain threshold for the reabsorption. So once it crosses that threshold, the glucose cannot be reabsorbed in the urine and it is excreted through the urine. And this condition is called as glycosuria. So this excretion of glucose in urine will increases the osmotic pressure of the urine, or it causes osmotic diuresis. So this will lead to polyuria, that is increased frequency of urination. So once there is increased frequency of urination, there is excessive loss of fluid. So that can cause dehydration. So this dehydration will be the whatever blood volume which is lost through polyuria will be replaced osmotically in the body from the water held in the body cells and other compartments. So there is increased since because of increased dehydration, which is because of hyperosmolality, it causes increased thirst, which is known as polydipsia. So increased fluid loss, which is causing dehydration, that is secondary to hyperosmolality, causes increased thirst, that is polydipsia. So we see polyuria, polydipsia, dehydration. So all these things polyuria, polydipsia, dehydration. Since there is excessive loss of glucose in the body, there is weight loss we also see in the patients. So the basis for clinical symptoms is excessive blood glucose in the body. The reabsorption threshold of kidneys will be exceeded, so there is glycosuria, which causes osmotic diuresis or hyperosmolality, which causes polyuria with loss of fluid, and also there is loss of electrolytes also. This fluid loss will be leading to dehydration, which in turn stimulates polydipsia or thirst center in the brain. So the patient will have polydipsia, polyuria. Once the glucose is lost, the patient will feel more hungry because the energy is required, so they will start eating more, and in spite of eating more, they will lose weight. So there is weight loss. So the events or the sequence usually which is seen in diabetes will be glycosuria, polyuria, polydipsia, polyphasia, and they will have weight loss. So certain differences between type 1 type 2 diabetes. Age of onset for type 1 is usually less than 40 years. It is commonly seen, if it is present, it is common during childhood or puberty, and symptoms usually develop rapidly. Whereas type 2, it is frequently occurs after 40 years or more common in 50 years, and symptoms, there is gradual development. Nutritional status at the time of disease onset. Type 1, they will be undernourished, whereas type 2, they will be usually obese. Appearance. So type 1 patients are usually thin or of normal weight, whereas type 2 are obese patients. Prevalence of type 1 is less than 10% and type 2 is more than 90%. Autoantibodies are seen in type 1, whereas autoantibodies are not seen in type 2. Genetic predisposition is moderately associated with type 2, whereas it is very strongly seen in type 2 diabetes mellitus. The main defect in type 1 is destruction of beta cells, which is autoimmune mediated. So there is no insulin production. In type 2, it is resistance to the insulin action. Frequency of ketosis or diabetic ketoacidosis is common in type 1, whereas it is rare in type 2. Plasma insulin levels are low, or sometimes there is absolute deficiency, whereas in type 2 initially it will be high, later on it will be on the lower side. Acute complications. Ketoacidosis is common in type 1, whereas hyperosmolar state is common in type 2. In mode of treatment, for type 1 it is insulin, whereas type 2 the treatment includes modification in the lifestyle, that is exercise, proper diet with more of vegetarian food, oral hypoglycemic drugs, and if the patient is not responding, insulin can also be added for the stringent control of blood glucose. So the presentation, the classical symptoms of diabetes, that is increased thirst, polyuria, nocturia, that is increased frequency of urination at night time, and rapid weight loss are common in type 1. Whereas type 2, these symptoms are usually not very obvious or absent, and the presentation is asymptomatic, or they will have non-specific symptoms like chronic fatigue or malaise. If the diabetes is not diagnosed or if it is uncontrolled, the patients will have increased susceptibility to infections. They will have more of skin sepsis, boils or delayed wound healing, genital candidiasis, muscle cramps. Some patients will have nausea, mood changes, and also irritability. So the investigations, the primary investigations which is recommended is estimation of plasma glucose, that is fasting blood glucose, postprandial blood glucose, and HbA1c, and even oral glucose tolerance test is also advised. Secondary level of investigations include lipid profile, that is to know how much cholesterol, triglyceride, LDL, HDL levels are seen, uric acid, urea creatinine, and microalbumin estimation. So the normal fasting blood sugar is less than 100 milligrams per deciliter, whereas PPBS is less than 140 milligrams per deciliter. Impaired fasting blood sugar will be 101 to 125, whereas PPBS is 141 to 199. Diabetes is diagnosed when fasting blood sugar is more than 120 milligrams per deciliter, whereas PPBS it is more than 200 milligrams per deciliter. HbA1c, which is also known as glycated hemoglobin, and this is formed by non-enzymatic irreversible covalent attachment of glucose to the amino groups of proteins, that is hemoglobin. And the rate of formation of HbA1c is directly proportional to the blood glucose concentration. That means if there is more blood glucose in the body, there is more and more formation of HbA1c. And this HbA1c indicates average glucose levels over 2 to 3 months, and it is usually used in the diagnosis and assessment of glycemic control. Normal reference range less than 5.7% is considered as normal. 5.7 to 6.4 is impaired glucose tolerance. More than 6.5% of HbA1c is diagnostic of diabetes mellitus. And the gold standard method used for estimation is HPLC, that is high performance liquid chromatography, and immunoturbidometry is also used. The advantages with HbA1c are greater convenience. That means patient need not be in fasting status. The sample can be connected anytime. It has less pre-analytical errors and less day-to-day variations even during stress and illness with respect to HbA1c. So the diagnostic criteria for diabetes mellitus includes more than 126 milligrams per deciliter of fasting blood glucose on one or more occasion if there are no symptoms. But if there are symptoms, FBS is more than 126, it is diagnostic for diabetes mellitus. And PPBS more than 200 milligrams per deciliter is considered or suggestive of diabetes mellitus. Or HbA1c more than 6.5% done using standardized method, that is HPLC, will also suggest diabetes mellitus. If a patient is having classic symptoms of hyperglycemia and random blood glucose is more than 200 milligrams per deciliter, it is suggestive of diabetes mellitus. So these are the diagnostic criteria for diabetes mellitus. And the metabolic syndrome, as I have already mentioned, includes central obesity, hypertension, increased LDL and triglycerides, decreased HDL, and impaired fasting glucose. Thank you.